and listen, and I'm really grateful that you're all here to share this space. And those of you who've been coming, you know that we usually begin with a little chit chat. Sometimes I like to ask a little check-in question, but what I've decided to do today is I'm going to read names of men and women who have died at the hands of police in this country. And I will read names until 8:15 when we start our show. I would ask you if you can please mute yourself, and if you'd like to take yourself off video. Otherwise, just please, if you can be respectful. Ahmaud Arbery, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, John Crawford III, Michael Brown, Dante Parker, Michelle Clouseau, Rekia Boyd, Ayanna Jones, Pearlie Golden, Tarika Wilson, Miriam Carey, Chantal Davis, Taisha Miller, Kendra James, Shelley Frey, Rodney King, Alice Green, Abner Louima, Amadou Diallo, Sean Bell, Trayvon Martin, Maya Hall, Philip White, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Freddie Blue, Joseph Mann, Salvada Ellswood, Albert Joseph Davis, Darius Stewart, Billy Ray Davis, Michael Sabi, Brian Keith Day, Christian Taylor, Felix Kumi, Keith Harrison McLeod, Lamontez Jones, Patterson Brown, Dominic Hutchinson, Alonzo Smith, Tyree Crawford, India Kager, Michael Lee Marshall, Jamar Clark, Richard Perkins, Miguel Espinal, Michael Noel, Kevin Matthews, Quintonio Laguerre, Keith Childress Jr., Janet Wilson, Wendell Celestine, David Joseph, Christopher Davis, Marco Loud, Peter Gaines, Kevin Hicks, Terrell Thomas, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Paul O'Neill, Alteria Woods, Ronell Foster, Stefan Clark, Antoine Rose II, Pamela Turner, Dominique Clayton, Dolores Epps, Heather Parker, Jacqueline Robinson Culp, Karen Day Jackson, LaPortia R. Watson, Makala Ross, Melissa Williams, Monet Turnage, Oscar Grant, Lacan McDonald, Walter Scott, George Floyd, there are so many more. And what I feel inspired to do, what I feel driven to do tonight is just to say their names. So welcome everyone. Again, if you're just joining us, if this is your first time here, my name is France-Luce Benson. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Fountain Theater. I am the host of this series, Saturday Matinees. We've been doing this, I think, since March now, when we first went into lockdown in Los Angeles. And it's really a way for us at the Fountain to stay connected to all of you, our audience, our Fountain friends, our family. We miss seeing you at the theater. We miss sharing the experience of live theater with you. And this is our way to just stay connected to you and let you know how much you mean to us. And we look forward to being with you in the theater again, eventually. We have two guests tonight, two wonderful artists. The first is a poet. He is a native of Panama and he is based in New York City. He is a recipient of the National Endowment for the Arts Creative Writing Fellowship in Poetry, the Drinking Gourd Poetry Prize from Northwestern University Press. And he just recently, a few weeks ago, I think, was awarded the Andres Montoya Poetry Prize from the Letras Latinas and University of Notre Dame Press. And both of his prize-winning collections of poetry are forthcoming in 2021. He's also a very gifted playwright. His plays have been seen in New York at the National Black Theater and throughout New York and the country. And I am very, very delighted and honored to welcome Darrel Alejandro Holnes. Welcome, Darrel.
Thank you, France-Luce. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for reading those names. It was a moving tribute to those who we've lost.
Yes.
So,
So before we begin, I just want to remind everyone to please keep yourself muted. And while the performers are presenting, I would suggest you to switch to speaker view. And that's at the top right corner of your screen. I also put instructions in the chat. So if you switch to speaker view, then you will only see the performer. And you also may want to take yourself off video, and that's at the bottom left corner of your screen next to mute. You can take yourself off video, so that way we are only seeing our beautiful performers. So Darrel, welcome. Thank you for being here. I know this is a really intense time for everyone, and artists included, people in the theater included. And so it really means a lot to me that you are willing to share your beautiful words with us. So do you want to talk a little bit about the first poem you're going to share? I know there is a graphic behind it. It was inspired by one of Kehinde Wiley's paintings.
yes, I went to the Brooklyn Museum when they did an exhibit to celebrate Kehinde Wiley's work and was really moved by this one painting called Sleep by Kehinde Wiley. And I wrote a poem inspired by this painting and my experience viewing it, because it reminded me so much of the Black men who have been victims of police brutality, who have taken this similar pose. Doing it, a lot of the media reminded me so much of those stories. And Black men who have been victims of police brutality, who have taken this similar pose. Doing it, a lot of the media reminded me so much of. So I wrote this poem in a tribute to them. And my poem is an attempt to do what Wiley has done here, which is elevated these Black men. And my impression of the poem is that there's something tragic, but also something serene about it. And I took that feeling and I put it into this poem called Breaking and Entering. Only beasts are supposed to hibernate, but this brother has been lying there for years. Truth isn't a news headline. Between the lines lay his body. Between brushstrokes, his soul ascends, doing those things portraits rarely capture. Giving life, giving face, serving. A Black man's body on display hangs in a museum or above a white man's couch. He appears wrapped in a bedsheet covering his private parts as if he was a sexless Christ, as if his private parts made him pray, or as if both prey and Jesus were one in the same. But perhaps it's just respectful to cover a dead man, or at least to cover where he was broken into, entered by an angel who gave him wings, or by an artist who gave him a better burial than the other brothers got. Those over there just left on the streets.
Wow, so beautiful. Thank you. I remember seeing that exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum, and I was so struck and inspired by Wiley's commitment to portraying us with such dignity and beauty, but also authentically as we are. I think that's one of the things that I love so much about his work. I know for me, not to get too deep, but the poem, hearing the poem is really evocative, and just makes me think of this week kind of being re-traumatized by a lot of the images that I've been seeing, and I want to stay informed, and I'm, watching the news and I'm online, but those images are so painful. And for me as a writer, it takes me a while to process emotions and to, as a playwright, to kind of, I have to process and then find what the story is that I want to tell in it. And I'm just curious about when you see images, do you hear language? Do you find language right away? Are you able to transform it immediately, or do you have to sit with it? Like, what is that process for you?
When I was an undergrad, I worked with a poet named Jericho Brown, who just actually this year won the Pulitzer Prize in poetry. And I remember him reading my poems and saying that I was really moved by the blues. And I rejected it at the time, that idea, because I saw my poems as, and poetry in general, as this safe space that, in a lot of times, kind of picked me up. But I realized that he was right, And he was just a graduate student at the time, who sort of took a moment to give me feedback about my poems. And he was really right, though, because a lot of what I try to do with poems is uplift and pick myself up. And so with this poem, I am uplifting myself and picking myself up and hopefully picking up the reader. And dignity is, I think, a great word. And I'm glad that you said it, France-Luce, in relation to Wiley's paintings, because I do see the dignity that he gives Black and brown bodies in his work. And I tried to do the same with this poem, picking up our brothers, sisters, trans folk who have been thrown down, gunned down by police who are using excessive force. And in picking them up, I'm hoping to give them a sort of dignity that Wiley does in his work. And that is why, even though I think Jericho is right, a lot of my work does kind of come from this place of despair, I still think of it as uplifting and hopefully inspiring for readers.
And I know you're an educator. Do you share your work with your students? And I'm wondering how they respond to your work.
Yeah, I have shared my work with students before. NYU does a faculty reading series where we can read works in progress. And I found that opportunity in particular to be really interesting. The philosophy behind it is that we are telling students that it's okay to be in transition. You don't have to feel like the work is finished in order to share it with those around you, and that even published writers, even your professors, at some point their work is in progress. It's not always finished. And I really enjoyed those opportunities more than any others, or more than, I shouldn't say that. I've enjoyed those opportunities a lot. And particularly because there is that component that says, I'm figuring this out too. And that a lot of the work that students typically encounter in a classroom on a syllabus is work that has gone through a really rigorous process of revision. And so they're used to seeing work that is so polished that it feels sometimes out of reach. And so I think the Work in Progress series gives them a sense of work that is within reach. Like, oh, that's a draft. I have the third draft of my poem, and I'm a poet too.
Mm, beautiful. So what is the next poem you're going to share? Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yes. This next poem is called Angelitos Negros, and it shares its title with a Mexican film by the same name from the 1950s. That starred Pedro Infante, who is this mega star from the era. And the Mexican-American poet Rigoberto Gonzalez told me about this film and encouraged me to watch it. And once I started it, I immediately saw why. The film is about a white Mexican couple who gives birth to a daughter who is Black, and the mother rejects the daughter because of her Blackness. And so the father then goes to this church and he sings a song asking God to please paint Black angels in the sky, to please paint Black angels into heaven, so that his wife could learn to love their daughter and could learn to accept the daughter despite the color of her skin. And racism is rampant in Latin America, just like it is in the United States. There is a long legacy of slavery that our ancestors have endured, that in a lot of ways position Black populations in Latin American countries in a similar way that African Americans are positioned here. And I'm really interested in sharing those stories and in shedding some light on those injustices as a way of also being supportive of conversations around injustices here. And I wrote this poem with that spirit in mind as a tribute to the victims of systematic oppression and racial injustice, which of course include the victims of police brutality in Latin America. So this is called Angelitos Negros. In the Mexican film Angelitos Negros, both parents appear with skin as white as a Gitano's boleros sung by an indigena accompanied by the Moor's guitar. Bleached by celluloid in 1948, when in America, the world's rainbow was polarized into black y blanco. In the film, Pedro Infante plays Jose Carlos and sings Angelitos Negros while sitting in a chapel, asking the painter of the church's art to paint a picture with black angels who look like his character's dark-skinned daughter, a child his wife refuses to accept. Pintor, si pintas con amor, ¿por qué desprecias su color? Si sabes que en el cielo también los quiere Dios. Tonight, I sing the same song for my morenos absent from my cathedral walls. O painter, painting with a foreign brush to the rumba of its old world bolero, listen to our angels' chorus of inocentes morenos muertos. We morenos in the barrio cook a gumbo quilombo, our little taste of heaven, with matches and propane and coal stones under a pot of cabra y culebra. We morenos are brown turned black, burnt by fire fired from guardia guns, shooting us congos for the chanchudos of a rabiblanco legislador. Listen to los pelaos in the favelas kicking around the soccer ball. De pie, a pie, de pie, a pie, de pie, a pie, cabeza, cabeza, goal! Forced out of their homes by a world-class stadium they can never afford to get into. They too deserve to be painted. Pintor. Pintor, si pintas con amor, ¿por qué desprecias su color? Now Eartha Kitt sings Píntame Angelitos Negros, the same Andrés Eloy Blanco poem Infante set to song on thrift store vinyl, playing in homemade YouTube clips. Through my headphones, I hear Kit raise her voice high enough to swallow evening if it does not give her a sky with dark-skinned angels in its clouds tonight. Then dusk falls over the continent, built on shadows, shackles, and shame, as the news paints yet another negro as the devil. Broken-winged blackbird, 3 shades of jade, fly into the dark matter of outer space. Perhaps up there is a better painter, better God for us all to obey.
Beautiful. Thank you. Oh, I didn't know you could sing like that. It's so interesting. I love this line. They deserve to be painted too. It's really interesting to hear that in juxtaposition with the poem that you just read. You know, one thing that comes to mind as I'm reading your work again and hearing you read your work is the cultural influences, which, as you know, I also write in
Mhm.
more than one language.
Yeah.
And I don't know, can you talk a little bit about the challenges of straddling various cultural
Mhm.
identities as
Yeah.
a theater artist, and particularly, or maybe how that is manifesting in this moment right now?
Sure, sure. You know, I think for me, it's really important. It really goes back to my first experiences with language. And so I grew up in a household that spoke English, Spanish, and a little bit of Creole, a little bit of the Creole French, from family members who are from St. Lucia and Martinique and Grenada and I don't know, so many Guadeloupe, sorry. And so for me, when I go to write, I bring my ancestors with me to the page. And I also think of my first language as music and have to bring music to the page when I write a poem. And so when I go back to what inspired me to write in the first place, a lot of it is music. A lot of music was how I first encountered literature. It's how I first encountered narrative. It's how I first encountered verse and rhyme and all of these elements that come into the poem. And um, part of me is always writing a very long salsa song every time I write a poem. Part of me is writing an Anita Baker, Luther Vandross R&B song. Every time I write a poem, I do think that Jericho had a point when he said that I'm very inspired by the blues because I also hear the blues in my influences in those forms of music. So that is what that's how I bring all of those worlds together. To me, they're not separate worlds. They're the single world that I'm from. And I'm really thinking a lot about how Black Lives Matter in this moment is a global movement. I'm really thinking about how in Brazil, 8 out of 10 deaths that happen to citizens when they're in police custody happen to Black Brazilians. I'm thinking about how you are twice as likely to die by the hands of a police officer in the United States if you have Black skin. I'm thinking of the ways that across this entire continent and even around the world, Black people are victims of state sanctioned violence. And I believe in the unity of our different communities and how there is something that we share in this struggle. And so I hope that I make that apparent in the poems. I hope that if you are from the United States, you see the reality that you're facing here as the reality that's in that poem I just read. I hope that if you are in Panama or anywhere in Latin America, that you see a reality that you recognize in the poem I just read, and that maybe you also see yourself in the realities of the situation here in the United States. You know, I think that there's a lot of the reason why protests are happening all over the world is because this is a global problem.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping that justice for George Floyd, I'm thinking about Breonna Taylor, I'm thinking about Ahmaud Arbery, I'm also thinking about Trayvon Martin, I'm thinking about everyone that has passed, men, women, trans folk, gender nonconforming folk, Black people who have all been state sanctioned violence. And the conversation is really one that should concern the entire world in all of the languages and all of the art forms and all of the ways.
Yeah. I have so much identification as a first generationer. I know you have one more short piece to share. I do want to ask one last question before you share and we hear Tom play some music, because you are an educator, and I know a lot of your students are students of color, and they're also first generationers from all over the Caribbean and Latin America. And what can we learn from that generation, this generation coming up?
Well, you know, it's funny because as a teacher, I talk a lot in the classroom. But my students have really taught me the power of listening, and the power of listening, even if I'm in a position of authority, even if I am there to share all of this knowledge that I have for them. They really taught me to listen, because they have so much to say, and they also are bringing and coming up with new ideas. And my students have also reminded me the importance of dreaming. You know, the ways that as I get older, you start to fall out of love with the world in a way. And my students come to the class every day with so much love for the art form, with so much love for their stories, with so much love for discovery and exploration, that it has made me really start dreaming again.
Hmm. I think that's a beautiful segue into your last poem. Thank you so much.
So this poem is by Langston Hughes, and it's called Dreams. And I dedicate this to all of the young folks out there that are looking at the news and wondering what the future might look like for them. I want to encourage them to keep dreaming. Dreams. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow.
Hmm. Thank you so much, Darrel. If you all want to unmute yourself for a moment and give him a much deserved applause, I welcome you to. Thank you so much, Darrel. I'm so grateful to know you and to call you a friend, and to be able to share your work and your artistic journey with you. Thank you so much. And our next guest is an extraordinary musician. He is also based in New York, and he is a librarian by day, but he's a singer-songwriter by night, with a very eclectic aesthetic. And please help me welcome Tom Angelo.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Tom.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to say, Darrel, your poems are amazing and very appropriate for where we are right now. And actually hearing them made me reconsider a little bit about what I wanted to play. I decided to start with something where I'm kind of outside of my lane, as they say. This is a song by an idol of mine named Gil Scott-Heron. It's called Winter in America. And it was written right around the time of Watergate. And so I'm just going to try this. Keyboards are really not my first instrument, but I've been practicing, so, and it's only 4 chords. So yeah, let's see what I can do here. Hopefully Gil will be smiling. Here we go. Is that loud enough?
Yep.
Okay. Let me start that over. From the Indians who welcomed the pilgrims to the buffalo who once roamed the plains, like the vultures circling beneath the dark clouds, looking for the rain, looking for the rain. Just like the cities that stagger on the coastlines of a nation that can't stand much more. Like the forests buried beneath the highways, never had a chance to grow. Had a chance to grow. And now it's winter, a winter in America. And all of the healers have been killed or betrayed. But the people know it's winter. Winter in America. There ain't nobody fighting, 'cause nobody knows what to say. The Constitution, a noble piece of paper with free society, struggled but they died in vain. And now democracy is ragtime on the corner, hoping for the rain. Hoping for the rain. And I see the robins perched on barren treetops, watching last-ditch racists marching across the floor. Just like the peace sign that vanished in our dreams, never had a chance to grow. Never had a chance to grow. And now it's a winter, winter in America. And all of the healers have been sent away. But the people know it's winter. Winter in America. And there ain't nobody fighting, 'cause nobody knows what to say. And there ain't nobody fighting, 'cause nobody knows what to say. And there is nobody fighting, 'cause nobody knows what to say. So that was Winter in America by Gil.
Oh, free to unmute, give a little applause before we do the next. Thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out, by the way, that although although Gil Scott Heron saying, ain't nobody fighting because nobody knows what to say, obviously 46 years later, that's not true, and people are fighting, and God bless them, God bless every one of them, because hopefully they can help bring us out of winter and into spring. So this is, I'm also going to do a song on the guitar. This is an original, and it's a little different. I wrote this during kind of a difficult time in my life, and it's kind of embarrassing because I'm 50 years old. I just turned 50. I wrote this when I was like 32. It's called "I Don't Want to Grow Up," and it was just written during a difficult time, and lately it's had new meaning. I don't know if you ever reached the point where you stop thinking about your childhood, but I haven't quite reached that point yet. So hope you like this. You may take your cell phones with 100 minutes free. Your inter-office memos, they don't mean a thing to me. Take your house and keys and car, they didn't make you what you are. I don't want to grow up. Take your computer networks and crash them, I don't care. I'd rather hang by my knees from trees while playing truth or dare. Take your weekend conferences, I don't care what some guru says. I don't want to grow up. I don't want no pressures, no responsibilities. To look into a mirror and see what my dad sees. You may call me infantile, I would say you're in denial. Who wouldn't rather be a child? I remember childhood as not all fun and games. Teachers' disapproval, bullies calling names. But anytime my feelings hurt, I could wipe my eyes on my mother's skirt. I don't want to grow up. I don't want to grow up. Mama, I don't want to grow up. No, I don't want to grow up. Thank you.
Woo! I love your voice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I hit some bad notes there, but
Oh, please. You have one more that you want to share? Do we have time for one more?
yeah, it's up to you guys. If you have, I do have another one I could do. But if you have,
let's do one more quick one.
okay. Well, seems I cannot quite remember the opening chords to that. So I'm just going to go in. That's the intro. I'm just going to go into this song. It's a song by Jimmy Cliff, one of my favorites, called "The Harder They Come." Well, damn it. You know what? I wanted to do that, but I changed the chordings around and I do not know quite where to start. So let me play an original instead. I'd love to do that and go out on that note, but let me do this instead because I'm going to mess that up. When I was a young boy watching Taxi Driver and Clue, we come down here to the city each year. I love the Oroville repute, but when we finally made it here, it took a while for my eyes to clear and realize it would all disappear in a blear of big ugly condos. You might live in a tenement with neighbors on every side. You might own a townhouse that you maintain with pride. Unless you own the city planning commission where they earmark buildings for demolition, you might end up without a pot to piss in as your home becomes a big ugly condo. A big ugly condo. You block out the sun. You disgrace the folks whom society shuns. Shoddy apartments for $500,000 down. We should burn you to the ground. I admit to distracting myself from civilization's downfall. But when did we decide to turn this world into one big strip mall? It's a sad state when an abandoned lot could mean more than than a sixth-floor horror neighborhood got when some blob get a big ugly condo. A big ugly condo. You block out the sun. You displace the folks whose society shuns. Shoddy apartments for $500,000 down. We should burn you to the ground. We should burn you to the ground. My attorneys have asked me to tell you, please don't burn anything to the ground. I'm not very good at accompanying.
Thank you. Feel free to unmute, give a round of applause. Thank you so much for being here, Tom. It was great.
Thank you for having me.
Beautiful, soulful music. So before we go, I want to thank our guests again, Tom Angelo, Darrel, Alejandro, Holnes, and thank you all for joining us. I want to remind you that tomorrow at 5 p.m., we will be presenting a reading of the play Citizen, an American Lyric, written by our own Stephen Sachs. It's an adaptation of Claudia Rankine's book. So if you can make it tomorrow, it's very relevant of the moment. Claudia Rankine is brilliant. Her book about racial bias and a lot of what's happening in this moment now is really important. So hopefully you can make it tomorrow. We have an amazing cast. As always, I'd like to leave you with a little word tonight from Paulo Coelho. When we least expect it, life sets us a challenge to test our courage and willingness to change. At such a moment, there is no point in pretending that nothing has happened or in saying that we are not ready. The challenge will not wait. Life does not look back. Thank you all again for joining us. I hope you can make it tomorrow, and I'll see you next week. Have a wonderful night and a beautiful week. Stay safe and stay strong. Good night.
Thanks, France-Luce.
Thank you, France-Luce. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.